The Sonic the Hedgehog series has pretty much had a rough time since the mid-2000s. Some games were generally good, but they usually ranged from milquetoast to just plain bad. And since the most recent game at this point, Sonic Forces, wasn't exactly amazingly received, Sega just decided to go back to the drawing board. So they can make the new game, Sonic Frontiers, a new open-world adventure. But if I'm being completely honest, I wasn't exactly looking forward to this new Sonic game, unlike some people. I thought that the game looked fine, but somewhat unfinished, even in trailers after that disastrous IGN video. This game seemed ambitious, even in spite of its technical issues, but I overall thought it would be pretty dull considering the gameplay that we saw. The marketing for this game was probably the worst marketing for any video game ever. Even the ones that aren't marketed are better than the marketing for this game. They showed off the genuine worst parts of this game, which seems so boring and broken. There was so much pop-in and jittery movement and no momentum at all. Sega didn't even show the story, which is like the most hyped thing since it's written by Ian Flynn this time. They were rather discreet and vague about the plot of this game. Rather than just giving us plot details, it was pretty much just described as what happens in the first two cutscenes of this game. I honestly don't know how Sonic fans are gonna feel about this video, because I don't think this game was bad, even if there are parts that just feel incomplete here and there. That's what we're gonna talk about today. This is why Sonic Frontiers is solid, yet underwhelming. Well, first, there's no better way to start than talk about the story of this game. The story in this game is simple, and unlike certain other games that I've talked about on this channel, I won't have to skip a bunch of plot beats that are absolutely necessary to understand the plot. But there will be spoilers for this one, so be on your guard, I guess. Yeah, whatever, let's get into it. The story begins with Eggman searching in the forest for a reason that's probably explained in a comic or something, and enters a portal into cyberspace where he's guided and led by an AI named Sage, who is later revealed to be Eggman's robotic daughter, I guess. Like, okay, whatever. We then cut to Sonic with Tails and Amy as they detect where the Chaos Emeralds are. However, they get sucked into Portal 2. Afterwards, Sonic is separated from his friends, and he is told by an AI to look for his friends to defeat the Titans. By the way, this AI is totally not the villain or anything. Nuh-uh, However, he is stopped by Sage, who tells him to leave. But, Sonic being Sonic just decides to be defiant, I guess. He totally gets his ass kicked afterwards, and then he decides he needs to find the several Chaos Emeralds. He then finds the Chaos Emeralds and defeats the Titan, which is pretty much just how it happens for all of these islands, I guess. You then meet Knuckles in a different island, and there's an odd amount of sexual tension here. You people wanted this, I guess. And from then on, nothing big really happens. So yes, I can skip plot beats. However, it is eventually revealed that the AI voice lady is actually evil. Well, who could have seen this coming? Then Sonic and Eggman call a brief truce, and they stop the last Titan, which turns out to be a distraction from the main stuff going on up there in space. And they fight the End. Wow, what an original name. Who's essentially just a giant planetoid that shoots lasers, and I'll get to that later. However, after the fight, Sage sacrifices herself, and the game ends, but Eggman then rebuilds her because she's his robotic daughter. What the fuck? Alright, time for my actual thoughts. The story is overall fine. It's not the story that narratively fixes Sonic for good, but it's at least better written and just a better attempt than the last game, which honestly feels kind of like a filler issue in spite of its high stakes. I actually like the fact that they try to go into the origin of the Chaos Emeralds in this one, which is pretty alright, which is usually because they're vaguely explained in the actual game themselves. However, the story overall is not great, not awful. I think there were probably some cut parts, which we'll talk about with the gameplay later, I guess. And I do think it does drag out for length way too long. But I like the characters, kind of, mostly. The characters are different, and you can tell that especially by Sonic's voice. You can tell that he's matured since the past few games, where he was just way too overly energetic to the point where it was annoying. I don't think he had a stupid amount of depth here, but he's fine. His friends aren't awful either. My only real issue with Sonic is that there's a plot point about him being corrupted by cyberspace, but when it's actually most important and he gets fully corrupted, he just kind of passes out. It doesn't corrupt his thinking or anything. It doesn't even make him think to himself, maybe he should give up now. He just kind of collapses. And the worst part about this plotline is that how they remedy this is, and I'm being serious here, through the power of friendship. What the fuck? And the worst part is, it's barely talked about again. What a missed opportunity to show how the world corrupted it besides the physical part. All it shows is that his tenacity is very strong until he just collapses, which this game won't shut up about, and I'm pretty sure the Sonic fanbase already knows that Sonic never really gives up. Unfortunately, this corruption plot is just incredibly meaningless and negligible. Whatever, we'll move on. Sage is actually a fine antagonist, although for the most part she does repeat the same things. You can't be here. Leave immediately. Yuck yuck. Although, I do like Eggman in this game. Since Sage is basically Eggman's daughter, I actually like their relationship in this game. It's not really fleshed out or anything, but I think it's better on Eggman's part, because he's just so humanized here. I don't know how they're actually going to use him as an antagonistic force in the next games, even as an obstacle for Sonic. But damn, Eggman's development was actually pretty decent in this game. I actually like that he cares for Sage, and that's pretty apparent. Although on Sage's part, I think that little montage of them remembering their moments together was pretty rushed, as it doesn't really show anything. They could have just shown her creation or some shit. But like, they just show the previous cutscenes from earlier. Like, fucking okay. Fine, sure, whatever. The absolute worst character here, though, is the End. Yes, the AI voice lady. He/she/them/it. Whatever, I don't care. It's such a predictable villain. And even without that, the End just sucks as an antagonist. I'll just repeat what Charai5 said. The End has sentience and intelligence, and only just kills discriminately, though, which is hilarious. Like the other gods and powerful forces of nature in this universe. Because why not? Which was fine for those other villains, because those guys were monsters and beasts. But the End has intelligence and should be able to have a motivation for this type of stuff. Like, there's no need for this thing to be a planet-sized Frieza if there's literally no motivation. The End overall just sucks, but I'll get into that into the gameplay part, though. I think a part of the story that's a saving grace and also the kiss of death in this game is the dialogue. This game was penned by Ian Flynn, as I mentioned earlier. He writes the Sonic comics that I don't read because why the fuck would I? He wrote some genuinely good dialogue, but unfortunately I feel like the cutscenes aren't really well-directedly expressive enough to, like, you know, warrant this type of good dialogue. It's not that games shouldn't have good dialogue or anything, it's just that these cutscenes are so static. Yeah, they're more tresses and forces, but I'll get into that later. Also, while I mostly like the dialogue in this game, some of the shit feels really forced, like, good god.
Hey, I've seen my fair share of pinball machines. I know one when I see one.
We get it! It's a pinball machine! You're referring to Sonic Spinball, and that Generations minigame. We know, oh my god! Also, Styx the Badger is apparently canon now.
I wonder if cream and sticks are free. Make a road trip out of it.
Even though she exists in the Boom universe. So they just never introduced her in this main one, I guess. That's interesting. Overall, the story and characters were okay. I don't think it's a story as good as Adventure 2 or Unleashed, but it's definitely refreshing after Forces just straight up stumbled. The best score to give this would be a You Tried out of 10. It's alright. Well, before we get into the gameplay, let's talk about the visuals. So, do these visuals look any good? Artistically, this game looks fine. I don't think it's aesthetically sound like Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey, but the worlds are fine. The rendering is kind of muddy in this game, but more so in the beginning of the game for some reason. The islands look a tad better when they go along, but it looks kind of dull in the first island. And it doesn't mix well with some of these cutscenes just looking so static and boring. I feel like the rendering is so dull because it had to run on the Nintendo Switch, which is clearly an aging console. Fuck you, Nintendo! Also, the color palette is so dull in the open world, but they're weirdly vibrant in the cyberspace stages, which is odd, but okay, whatever. I think that the worst thing about the visuals, as of recording this, is the excessive amount of pop-in. Whenever you're in the open world, or I'm sorry. Open zone, assets and in some cases enemies just pop in and out, and it gets really annoying. Especially when it's imperative assets just kind of popping in, just like summoning themselves into existence. Not even a fucking fade. Just like awkwardly just places itself. However, I think something that kind of remedies this is the fact that the frame rate is at least good, especially on next-gen consoles. I played this game on PS5 and it looked great, especially at 60 FPS. When you're moving, it's really smooth and barely drops a frame. The visuals altogether look good, but not great. I think it's definitely a step up from Forces for the most part, even if most cutscenes are still kind of bland. But they're better than the last game. I still think that the ideal cartoony game animation and cutscenes will always be either Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart or Crash Bandicoot 4 or something. Now to get into the thing that we've all been waiting for. The gameplay. There will be a lot to talk about here, so we're gonna start off with the open zones themselves. They're okay in functionality. They don't have that much to do, or that's all that fun, but they're at least fun to run around in. The pop-in ruins the experience, but the worlds are still fun to run in. The problem is these hubs don't have any side activities because they're so empty. The map unlocking minigames are so monotonous and boring. Like, look at Sonic run in a straight fucking line as a challenge, apparently. The open zone activities are just boring as all hell. The open worlds are fine to run around in, at least, but the exploration for resources or map unlocking just isn't at all. On an editor's note, apparently, Rhea Island and Uranus Island are literally the same as the first island. You would know this not only by the environment, but also seeing it in the distance, apparently. Ellis Mark goes into detail about this one. Yeah, in the source files, for some reason, the 4th and 5th island, Rhea and Uranus Island, are listed as the first island in the files. So that's how you know that they were just lazy and they just wanted to just rush the game afterwards, and they didn't care that much. Oh yeah, you also have Big's fishing minigame, which is just kind of simple. It's not bad or anything, it's just not that fun. Although I will say it did help me speedrunning this game when I was starting to get frustrated by the monotony, but I did kind of forget that they were there, so I was just completely frustrated by the last island when I remembered that they were there. I could just fish and get more vault keys and shit. You know what, while Big's fishing minigames are completely piss easy, I'm kind of glad that they were, because like my sanity would be completely destroyed if I played them and they were just annoying. Next part of gameplay is the cyberspace stages. And I don't really think they're great, but they're not awful either. They aren't really special and they're kind of easy, but you know what, it's fine. They do recycle aesthetics though from older games and reuse them, and it gets visually boring. Nothing much to say here other than they're okay. I do think that the gameplay didn't really carry over because the controls can be sometimes really unruly, and sometimes the physics from the open world can be changed, like the drop dash just kind of stopping. Like, okay. The other part that's probably the most ambitious is the combat in this game. The combat is pretty much button mashy flashiness, but I still think that it looks visually nice. It really is all spectacle though, but I do find it weird that it just happens in short bursts. But I also find it weird that the parry is a hold command and not a timing and tap command, which is really dumb considering the whole point of parrying is that it's based on timing. Like, alright. I do think the enemy variety is pretty dull and weirdly sparse. They somewhat try changing it up, but it's not all that great. They pretty much just reuse these dull-looking character models throughout all the games, islands. And the normal enemies are just kind of bland. Also, the mini-bosses are kind of shit. because they're either really easy or frustrating because of the dumb camera or bad game design. The only one that's decent are pretty much just the later ninja fights, because I feel like they can give you the slip just a little bit. Although it's really weird that they're modeled to be curvaceous even though they're fucking robots. Throughout my time in the first island, I just thought to myself, when will I just have more fun than just in short bursts? Yeah, running around is kind of alright, but that kind of gets repetitive. But then I decided to just actually look for the Chaos Emeralds. And when I finally got the last one, I was just like, yeah, this Titan boss fight will be fine. But then he turned supersonic. And then this plays.
I'm hanging on to the other side. I won't give up till the end of me.
Holy shit.
It's time to face your fears. When your time has come and gone, I'll be the one to carry on. To break through it all and don't look down. You won't fade out, 'cause the fire in you never dies. It comes around to light the flame. They'll know your name. Burn it to the memory. Don't stop, we're on a mission. Overtime over all the competition. Counting up the damage when it's done. We can't pretend to listen. Sorry if it puts you in an imposition. We won't stop until the battle's won. They'll know, oh, we'll know your name. When we dance with destiny. I've been there and I've seen it. I'm never gonna stop believing. You'll find your flame. Oh, we can save the day. Not die.
Oh my god, these Titan fights are so fun. How did this happen? They aren't exactly challenging, but they are hype as all hell, like I expected, or at least what I wanted. The music in these fights is truly what carries these fights, and the animation here is top notch. This is like the best parts of a game like Metal Gear Rising or Bayonetta, especially in the music. Music in Sonic games are usually the best part, even of the worst games, but they do much more with this music. There's some screamo shit in it, and it's really badass. And even if there isn't screaming, it's usually some really great instrumental plays. The music is just also delightfully Sonic the Hedgehog, if that makes any sense. The hype and spectacle makes these fights really fun. The actual worst one was the last Titan, Supreme. Oh yeah, these naming systems are also incredibly terrible. You had to hit these triangularly shaped laser beam things, and it was kind of tedious, but overall, the music was still hype as all hell, and it still looked visually amazing. But then, it turns out, since this isn't the actual final boss, there's one more on hard mode. Now, what could this be? Oh, it's a planetoid. Okay, maybe they could do that thing where, like, you're just fighting the planet and it shoots lasers, where you're playing as Supersonic, maybe you get help from the Titans, and... Oh no, oh fuck. So, this is our final boss? This is real. This is exclusive to hard mode. This has to be, unequivocally, without the shadow of a doubt, the worst boss fight in any Sonic game. This has to actually be the worst encounter in any Sonic game that I've ever played. And this counts Solaris and the Time Eater from Generations. I played Sonic 06 and fought Solaris. And this is worse. What the hell happened here? They had all this hype music, this really flashy animation. It's so cool and fluid and really nice, and then they just get this 2D puzzle shooter minigame that I didn't even talk about beforehand. Yeah, it's an actual minigame, it's like a hacking minigame or something, who cares? But this This is the final boss. The final. What the fuck? How? Alright, an issue I have with this fight in terms of gameplay is the fact that you just mindlessly shoot at it. And the only quote unquote hard part about this is that the planetoid looking ass thing is incredibly spongy. And that's the only challenge. And then they also throw a bunch of particle effects on screen. And that's all that's hard about any of this. How did they fuck this up so badly? How? Why? Why was this the final boss? I'm gonna also mention something that Char5 said, which is that they also cut some content probably. In the beginning it says to work with the Titans, plural, to defeat the end, which means we were probably supposed to work with the Titans in a most synergetic gameplay that we've seen in this game. And they scrapped that, probably because of budgetary constraints. So they just went with this instead, where you're not even playing as Sonic. Like Sonic just has his thumb up his ass, just like sitting there, like, okay. This fight is just not a good way to end a game like this. We get a mildly hyped boss before, and then we get this bullshit? Like, come on, guys. The worst part is that the end monologue or whatever, narratively, is actually kind of chilling in spite of the fact that it's a little inconsistent with what's actually happening due to the, again, probably cut content. But yes, it's so chilling and so badass, but I can't fucking hear it because of this music. Like, what happened here? What the hell, guys? They couldn't put subtitles, of course, because it would be weird for a bullet hell section. But there's nothing at all redeeming about this fight besides that one thing I mentioned. And even then, it's not even that good, because I can't fucking hear the monologue. How did you guys screw this up so badly? Like, you have all this stuff, all this hype shit. Even the cyberspace levels had some effort put into it. In that case, it just feels like a waste of development time. This final boss is just so bad. There's a reason why this pissed a lot of people off. It's just such a dumb way to end this game. Well, at least the end credits song is pretty good. Well, both of them, since you get a different song on hard mode for some reason. I don't think it really mattered, but okay, cool. This review in retrospect seems like it was pretty negative, but I do think that this game is actually solid. Sonic Frontiers is a good template to build off of in my opinion. Just like how Adventure was a template for other 3D games in this entire series. This game is like that, but for Sonic games that may come out in the future, maybe. It's a fine basis that just needs more iteration, and overall just more fun gameplay elements to make it reach its full potential. The next Sonic game probably won't have the Switch and last-gen systems to hold it back, so I'm sure that they can improve from all of this. This game wasn't perfect, but I still think it marks a pretty good step in the right direction for this series. Whatever that may be.